listening to From the Pink Seats podcast of the State of Louisville Podcast Network. Now, here's your hosts, Jacob Lane, Matt McGavick, and Vince LaCoco.
From the Pink Seats podcast, Jacob Lane, Matt McGavick, Vince LaCoco. You just listened to the offensive preview and breakdown of Jeff Brohm and what to expect as he comes over from Purdue with Drew Schneider from Hammer and Rails. And we're going to dive right into the defensive part now here in episode 2. And as I mentioned at the tail end of that last episode, Louisville's got a lot of guys that they got to replace that were productive. I mean, Louisville's replaced defensive guys, under the Satterfield era and had guys step up, but never have they, have they lost 3 NFL draft picks under the Satterfield era on defense. There's a lot of things for Louisville to kind of figure out. And Drew, the defense for Louisville has been a major issue. I'm sure you know this since way back with Peter Sirmon in 2017 to Brian Van Gorder in 2018 to the early
UVG, baby. Oh my God.
UVG.
Smoking his Newport Lights and his
defense
Camaro,
killer.
pulling up with a
I have a fun story about that real quick. I was eating dinner in Athens out at a bar, and we were talking about Clemson football. I look over, and the guy's like, "Oh, you right?" I was like, "Yeah, no, right about Clemson." He's like, "Oh, well, I'm an assistant coach at Georgia. My last name's Van Gorder." And I was like, "Oh my God, you're Brian Van Gorder's son?" And then I was like, "Oh, I think I've said terrible things about your father on the internet."
Welcome to the club, man. We've all been there. Vince got the unique experience of being around him, but it sounds like he was a good guy at least, right? I mean, that's one of those.
His son was great. When he sat in the chat, he was great.
Exactly. Top 10, not top 10, but top tier, like beer drinking guy. You'd love to sit down and watch a game and have a beer with him, but, just can't coach football. It's all right. Some people just don't have it.
That's right, man. That's right. Well, let's talk about the defensive coaches that come over. One of the things that was really interesting back when Jeff Brohm kind of came up for the job in 2019 was there was a lot of conversation considering what Louisville had just been through with Peter Sirmon and Brian Van Gorder that in that point in time, Jeff Brohm would have brought over Nick Holt, who had been his long-time defensive coordinator, and we really would have probably kick-started the beginning of the end of the Jeff Brohm era at that point because of him still not being able to figure out defense, how to really kind of set himself up. And considering what Louisville had just been through, the fans really wouldn't have had much patience for bad defenses after bad defenses. But here we are in 2023. Mark Hagen, who is one of the co-defensive coordinators, and then one of our favorite people ever to coach at Louisville, at least me. I can't speak for these two, but Ron English was he's a one-hit wonder, right? Who's your favorite one-hit wonder, guys? Can we think like the Baja Men come to mind as one-hit wonders? Who are some other one-hit wonders? Do we know of any off the top of our head?
Eagle Eye Cherry from the 90s. Do you remember him? The Save Tonight guy? That was like when I was in high school. Yeah. No, I think he only did one thing. And, oh gosh, there's a few other ones that
ton of great one-hit wonders across all generations of music, and that's what Ron English was at the time for Louisville before he went to Eastern Michigan and then ultimately kind of bounced around and ended up back with Jeff Brohm at Purdue. But Louisville fans are really excited about the potential of Mark Hagen as the defensive line coach and Ron English as the secondary coach. And then you combine that with one of the most underrated things of the offseason that happened, and that's the retaining of Mark Ivey, Louisville's defensive line coach from last season, who will now move into the linebackers coach role. So all of that long-winded, kind of jargon to ask you, what's up with Mark Hagen and Ron English? Like, should we be excited about this, or is this, something that it's going to take some kind of time to work through the kinks?
Mark Hagen is an elite defensive line coach, and he is a badass recruiter, and Purdue's recruiting on the defensive line especially exponentially improved the second he stepped on campus. Because he played at Indiana, he's got local ties, regional ties, played at Indiana, coached at Purdue, went back to Indiana, then went to a stint in Texas and Texas A&M, and then jumped back to Purdue. So he's been around the block a few times, but that man can coach. I know a lot of former Purdue players that say he is the real deal, and that if you want to play for a dude, he's the dude you want to play for. So I have nothing but good things to say about Mark Hagen. I wish Purdue could have kept him. Like, if Purdue would have named Mark Hagen the head coach, I wouldn't have been sad.
So wow, that's a huge statement, because I know I wrote a piece earlier this year, kind of trying to break down the 4-2-5 in that scheme and system that they operate. And I watched their game against Penn State, their opener. I can't remember who they played, and their game against Michigan in the Big Ten Championship. And one of my biggest takeaways from that overall system and how Hagen and English operated is that it seems like the defensive linemen are the go-to guys when it comes to creating havoc plays, your sacks and tackles for loss. Whereas under Brian Brown's 3-4 scheme with Satterfield, the linemen are just basically guys who eat up blocks, while the linebackers behind them are the ones that kind of blitz into the backfield and make the big havoc plays. Where it seems like in this scheme, it's more so reliant on linemen kind of winning those one-on-one battles and linebackers kind of cleaning up behind the linemen in case they blow an assignment. Is that kind of far off from how this system operates?
That's about right. This is, if y'all are like, oh, we're going to go get, everybody gets a new defense, and they're like, oh, it's going to be aggressive. We're going to get after the quarterback. No, this is not, at least at Purdue, that was not what Jeff Brohm was down with. Like, if you just go back and look at the tackles for loss, sacks, Purdue is in the bottom most of the time. Holt basically got fired for bringing too much pressure and getting beat deep. Brohm does not like to get beat deep. And so you're going to see a lot of bend, don't break defense where the safeties are going to stay deep. You're gonna have two safeties. They're gonna hang out. The outside corners are gonna bail a lot. They're gonna play that sort of underneath, drop the linebackers, play that underneath zone, and then like you said, they're gonna if there's gonna be pressure, it's coming from the defensive line. It's not coming from the linebackers. It's not coming from the secondary. It's coming from the defensive ends.
Yeah, it seemed like when I was watching some of their blitz packages, it was more so reliant on, because when Louisville blitzed the ball under Brian Brown, it was coming from more often than not right up the middle from one of the inside linebackers. But for Purdue, a Purdue blitz under Hagen and English looked like another lineman crowding the line of scrimmage and having 5 guys on the line just going after it.
Yeah. No, you're not. It's not one where you're gonna like fire a dude late through a hole. Or that's sort of the pressure is going to come. They're just going to put another guy in. This is going to be, can somebody make a play? It's schematically is not like, you're not looking at like a Brent Venables defense or a West Going's defense at Clemson where they're sending safeties and corners and linebackers and dropping people in coverage. Defensive tackles. It is not that. It is very much it'll vacillate between 3-2-6 and like a 4-2-5, just sort of depending on what they want to do. At least that's what it looked like at Purdue. And again, you have to think, is that scheme or is that personnel? Like last year, just sort of looking at the numbers, sacks. Purdue's leading sack dude last year was Jack Sullivan at 5.5 sacks, and he was also in tackles for loss. The 8 Kydron Jenkins, he's sort of the hybrid linebacker defensive end for Purdue. He had 8 tackles for loss, 4 sacks, and he was sort of supposed to be the dude for Purdue. And just pressure is not a lot of what they did. George Karlaftis didn't put up big numbers at Purdue. That was sort of his deal in the draft, was they're like, he is a physical freak specimen, but look at his numbers, and you see his senior year, 4.5 sacks. This is a 5-star top, 20 recruit in the nation. 4.5 sacks, 10 tackles for loss. But the Chiefs draft him at the end of the first round because he should be better than that. So this is not a pressure defense. It's not a defense that's going to send guys. You're not good, or at least again at Purdue. I can't say that's going to be the same thing at Louisville, but just not a whole lot of getting after the quarterback with this defense, which I always thought was weird. That Brohm's offense and defense never seemed to really match each other. Like you kind of got this hyper aggressive offense where he's throwing the ball, and then you've got this sort of real passive, not passive, but they're not gonna get beat for big yards. They're gonna make you beat them 4 yards at a time.
Basically a defense that either dares you to throw underneath or dares you to run it.
Yeah.
For me, it's where these linebackers fit in for Louisville and how, young it's the guys we have to replace. So I'm going to ask you how the recruiting is overall on the defensive side of the ball.
Much, much, much better with Hagen on the staff. Otherwise bad. George Karloftis grew up in the shadows of the football stadium at West Lafayette. Honest to God, that was, and he was the guy, 5-star dude, clear. But other than him, name another Purdue defender in the last 5 years.
Yeah, that's
fair. And Corey Trice was all right, kind of, but again, he was another dude. They were that this year the NFL, he played corner. He's from Kentucky, big dude. 6'3", and they're we think he's good. We don't know what he looks like in man coverage that much. Maybe. But other than that, the recruiting picked up under Hagen. I think he will do really well in Louisville. I don't know how much Jeff Brohm watched the Purdue defense, to be honest with you. Sometimes it felt like he sort of, he kind of looked at the box scores, how'd the defense do today? All right, I guess. We'll look at the scoreboard. I never got the impression that Jeff Brohm had much interest in the defense, other than that he didn't like it when Nick Holt gave up chunk plays. But then he hired Bob Jocko, which was the absolute worst hire in the history of college football. So, buddy, man, that was a bad deal. It got better. Brad Lambert came in, but that was super weird, right? So Bob Jocko came in and he was just awful, and he's a weird guy. I don't know if y'all know Bob. He was the defensive coordinator for Notre Dame when they went with Manti Te'o in that little 3-4, and then he was the head coach at UConn when UConn was the absolute worst team in the nation. He made up the civil conflict trophy that everybody laughed at. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, and UCF is we don't care about this trophy. But anyways, yeah, he was there for a year, and he got fired. So Holt got fired, and then Jocko got fired, and then Lambert came in. I like Brad Lambert. He was the former head coach UCF. Or I'm sorry, not UCF. Charlotte. He was the former head coach at Charlotte. Then he was the defensive coordinator at Marshall, and he got fired when Doc Holliday got fired, and Brown brought him in for a year. And I liked the defense. It was a three-man front with sort of a roaming fourth guy, and basically two linebackers, five. It's basically the 4-2-5, and I liked that. And then he went back. He took the job at Wake Forest, defensive coordinator, and so you kind of scratch your head. He's got a lot of family ties to Wake, but you kind of go, how does Purdue lose a defensive coordinator to Wake Forest? And then he brought in English, and English was, Ryan's fine. He was fine. Purdue's defense was good last year. They bend don't break, didn't put a lot of pressure, but the teams didn't score a lot of points. And that was one of the questions y'all asked was like, about the Purdue defense. And I will say the Purdue defense kept Purdue in a lot of games. Like Purdue's offense struggled in some games that Purdue won, which was always surprising to me, where I sort of go, this is supposed to be Jeff Brohm's baby, like the offense, and the defense is outplaying them, and that happens a lot. So if you look at 2022 points per game, 2022 26.6, which was 75th in the nation, and the points per game 74th, 27.4. So neither great. 2021. And was Lambert's defense, and that was 29 points a game, 62nd in the nation, but 22 points against, 34th. So the defense was the better in 2021, 9-4. Purdue went 9-4, and the defense really led that team. And then look at 2020. I don't even look at 2020 because that was just such a weird year. But again, 73rd in the nation in points, 27 points a game, 67th on defense with 29.8 points a game. And then 2019 it's sort of the same thing. So the defense, 2019 points for 25.8, was 87th in the nation. Points against 30.6, which is 86th, and that's the year. That's the year it started, and did pretty well for the offense, but the defense was not great, and they went 4-8 that year. That was sort of the crash year for Purdue. 2018. 30 points a game, 30 points against. So the defense has been fair to million, but so has the offense, really. And so I feel like the defense under English was good. It was pretty disciplined. The tackling sucked. Real bad. Purdue beats Penn State last year if they can make a tackle, like a single tackle against anybody. I don't know if anybody – did y'all watch any of that game? Did anybody see any of that game?
Yep.
So y'all saw that at the end of the second half where they were like, all they have to do is get this guy on the ground and the half's over. Oh, we missed a tackle. Oh, we missed another tackle. Oh shit, he's still going. Are you serious? I got up to go pee. I was done. I was like, oh, we're just gonna take this lead into halftime. I'm cool with this. And then I heard yelling from the room. My wife was like, you need to come see this. Oh God.
That's never good.
Never good. Right. No. I've trained her up. She knows a good bit about football. At least she knows when things are going poorly, and I should be yelling at the screen. And so, right. If I'm not in the room and she sees something going down, she's like, "You need to come in here." And that was when the Penn State they ran like a out route, it's just a stop route, and scored a touchdown because Regal didn't tackle. So tackling was average. If you watch that Michigan game, I think tackling was also an issue at the end. But the defense played well against Michigan. They kept Purdue in the game long enough where you're like, come on, Brohm, come on, offense, and we just kept kicking field goals. But the defense is okay. I don't know how much Brohm, like I said, is involved or cares, which is actually kind of a selling point for defensive coordinators. He's not a dude that's going to get in there and be like, this is what I want to see. I'm going to meddle with the defense. He's just like, oh
gosh. And that's something that Louisville had to deal with last season when Satterfield.
I mean, y'all had Bobby Petrino as a coach. Y'all know this is the Bobby Petrino experience. Brom's just a nicer guy. People like Jeff Brohm, but it's a very similar experience. And I mean, some of that's good, dude. Bobby P, when he has stuff rolling with y'all, dude, that Clemson Louisville game in Death Valley. Oh my God, that took 5 years off my life. I mean, I'm sure that took 10 off yours life. So I get it.
But let me ask you this though. So, I know that we've joked about this with Jeff Brohm, and obviously it's a big deal when you're talking about a head coach being a head coach at a school that's an academic type of environment like Purdue, where you're producing, the world's best astronauts and engineers year after year, right? Like football is not necessarily at the forefront of that. And there's academic requirements and standards that come into getting recruits eligible and bringing them in. And obviously there's a lot of really smart football players out there. Not saying that there's not, but Louisville is not Purdue, right? And I've told my story in here of how I got into Louisville as like they must have accidentally like stuck my application to somebody else's and didn't realize it until it was too late, type of deal.
But Clemson the same thing with me. I was like, I got in.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, okay, cool. Oh,
I'm not gonna question y'all. Like, okay, if you're gonna let me come to this school here, okay, all right, that's
right.
I was gonna go to South Carolina, but
I'm the opposite of the Duke walk-ons. Like, I'm not there for the GPA, right? Like, that's not what they can count on me for. But with Jeff Brohm coming to Louisville, we've wondered and talked a little bit aloud about what the recruiting does and if that impacts improvement in his overall ability to win games, because at Louisville you don't have to have a 25 SAT or a 30 ACT or whatever score on the SAT. You don't need to be an astronaut. You don't need to be an engineer. You just need to come in and have an interest in sports. Like that's honestly from the selling point for kids who just don't really care about school necessarily. You can come to Louisville and get a degree in communications and sports and have a good career afterwards. But at the same time, you don't need the academic requirements. So Drew, do you see a scenario where without some of those stricter recruiting guidelines that Jeff Brohm's, can kind of take a step forward in the ACC?
Purdue's a tough place to recruit to. Pretty campus, but you gotta want to go to Purdue. Louisville's got a little more nightlife, right? Like you kind of have a little more fun. It's more of a city, urban atmosphere, a little more city, more stuff to do. I think he'll do fine recruiting there. It's always just a question of, is Jeff Brohm a head coach or is Jeff Brohm a really good offensive coordinator? And that was always just sort of the question at Purdue is he a head coach or is he an offensive coordinator who's paid really, really well? And that was always sort of our issue at Purdue is like, the offense is good. At times it gets hot. When it gets hot, it gets going. The defense is the special teams are not great. And sometimes he loses the thread a little bit, especially on offense. I will say that he does not help his defense at all. And that was some of our big losses where you're like, how did Purdue lose the opener to Nevada? And it's Jeff Brohm did not help the defense at all, where you're like, come on, just everybody's dying out there. We're in like the altitude first game in the heat, and we're throwing the ball up 10 in the fourth quarter, and our defense is just dying on the field. And you could see it, like the defense just sort of died, just like collapse down the stretch. And you're just, come on, just protect him a little bit. So that's what he's going to deal with at Louisville. Offense, defense. Jeff Brohm will make you yell at the television one way or the other. That is what I will tell you. You will be like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever seen, or like, what the fuck is going on? How is this happening? How are we losing to Syracuse because of 3 personal fouls at the very end of the game, with including a Jeff Brohm personal foul? And you just go like, what? I like Jeff Brohm. He did great things at Purdue. He pulled Purdue out of the dirt, like mud swamp of sadness. If you've watched Never Ending Story, that was where Purdue's football program was, just drowning in the swamp. Awful. Nobody cared. The stadium was like a quarter filled, and they gave those tickets away to like the needy, who were just looking for like a warm place to hang out for a little while. And he came in and he brought a lot of excitement. The offense was exciting. The defense was not so exciting, but it got the job done. And like I said, the best thing I say about Brohm's defense is he doesn't mess with it, which is fine. I mean, when I went to Clemson, I covered Clemson. Dabo Swinney does not mess with the defense. He just says, here's my defensive coordinator. Do your defensive coordinating thing. Get after the quarterback, I guess. I don't know. I'm more interested in the offense. And I think Brohm probably does the same thing. And that's not terrible. You got to know your strengths, know your weaknesses. If you don't know defense, why are you messing with the defense? So if Ron English is the dude, he was good last year. He was terrible at Florida. He was not great at Eastern Michigan, but
one-hit wonder, baby. That's what I said.
That's right. He was good at Louisville, so maybe y'all can catch fire twice. Maybe that's just what he needs. He needs that river water to really inspire him to call some good defense.
Really interesting when you talk about the defense because obviously Purdue, and we'll kind of end and wrap this show up here as one of the big topics that really was kind of my big debtor from Jeff Brohm when he was the candidate and the first time around and even the second time around. When you look at him as a head coach, right, he accomplished a lot of great things, right? Talking about getting to the Big Ten championship, beating number 2 Ohio State, winning a ton of, or not, I shouldn't say a ton, but winning games against several notable ranked teams throughout his tenure at Purdue.
Right.
But he also lost a lot of games, right? I have the record here. Let me pull it up real quick. I mean, over the course of his time at Purdue, he was 28-24 against non-ranked teams, which, as we were talking about before, it's kind of Satterfield-esque in terms of what that looks like, but it's a completely different. So I say all of that to say, defensively, right? Just to kind of wrap this episode up, what is it in those games defensively that Purdue did versus some of those bad losses, right? In 2017, you have Rutgers, you've lost to Northwestern a couple of times. There's losses in there too, as you mentioned, Nevada, Syracuse last season, which, hey, we can't say much here because us three goobers were like, oh, Louisville's going to kick Syracuse ass all day long. I put Vince's old game jersey on and declared in a radio studio that Louisville was going to go and destroy them. So, but what is it, right? Like, tell me, understand defensively how Ohio State wins so high, but Purdue wins so high, but loses so low.
So let's talk about the Ohio State game real quick. Ohio State did not score touchdowns. That's what, if Purdue is playing good defense, they are giving up yards, but not touchdowns. And so that Ohio State game, they were in the red inside the 10 3 times and walked away with 9 points. And that's really sort of the key to that Purdue defense is they're gonna give up yards inside the 20, between the 20s, right? So like you're between the 20s, they're gonna give you cushion. They're gonna let you hit those the passing game. They're gonna keep the top on there. They're not gonna let you beat them deep, and they're gonna make you execute. And so. And then you get inside the 20, and they're going to try to shrink the field and make stops in the red zone and make you kick field goals. And they've been good at that. Ron English was good at that last year. I mean, if you sort of just look through who Purdue played, they won a lot of games because the other team just could not put the ball in the end zone. And that, I think, for Louisville is going to be the key again this year. Is just can that Purdue or the Louisville defense keep teams out of the end zone and make them kick field goals? Because they're gonna get some yardage put up against them. So look at Ohio State, our last year's schedule. We have a 31 against Penn State. Penn State is 31-35. That was a shootout game. Shut out Indiana State. Syracuse 29-32. Again, sort of a shootout game. FAU 28-26. That was with O'Connell injured and Austin Burton playing quarterback. So that was sort of a little different game plan for Purdue. Minnesota, though, they win 20-10. Maryland win 39-29. Nebraska 43-37. They're always just doing enough to keep the teams out of the end zone when it matters. Illinois 31-24 win. Northwestern 17-9. Indiana 30-16. So that defense, the defense, you can't really, like I said, even against Michigan, they hung in there. They don't make a lot of plays, but they don't give up a lot of plays. Like that at halftime of the Big Ten championship game, it's 14-13, Michigan, and then the defense finally just sort of collapses. A lot of the defense is really dependent on the offense. If Purdue's offense is holding the ball, moving it, and not just going 3 and out, pass, punt, defense on the field, pass, punt, defense on the field, pass, punt. That's when Purdue gets into trouble. That's when teams like Wisconsin, who Jeff Brohm could not figure out, just steamrolled Purdue because the defense would hang, but the offense couldn't stay on the field long enough. So it would be like Purdue would have like a 6-play drive, and Wisconsin would have like a 12-play drive, and then Purdue would have like a 7-play drive, and Wisconsin would have a 14-play drive. And by the fourth quarter, like they were just dragging the Purdue defenders off the bench and like throwing them on the field, just begging them to play because they're just done. And so a lot of Purdue's defense is, can their offense protect them enough for them to play that sort of bend, don't break without just being gassed in the fourth quarter?
When it comes to a defense like that, where there is such an emphasis on bending but not breaking, were there ever moments, and I kind of think to that Michigan game in the Big Ten Championship, was there ever a moment where when you have a defense that more so relies on just not giving up huge scores, but like still allowing some semblance of offense to get down the field, is there ever a concern that like after a while opposing offenses kind of figure out what they're trying to do and just attack that with ease after a certain amount of time? Because it seemed like when you watch that game against Michigan, I mean, fatigue plays into it, obviously, but like you said, it's a 1-score game at halftime, and you look at the final score and you thought that Purdue never had a shot, and most of that is because Michigan scored at will. Was it more so fatigue, or was it Michigan exploited something in that defense that they just could go to over and over and over again?
Yeah, I mean, Michigan figured out that they just needed to hand the ball to Donovan Edwards, and he was going to just...
I mean, that's fair.
Yeah. I mean, it was like, okay, this defensive line is getting tired. We're going to hand it to our giant, also fast running back, and he's just going to, he's 6 foot, 200 pounds. But yeah, Donovan, he just decided to start handing the ball to Donovan Edwards, and there wasn't a lot Purdue could do about it. And that's just sort of, like I said, that was also the problem against Wisconsin on the defense, that eventually they're just going to hand the ball to the running back. And there's not, by the fourth quarter, there just wasn't a lot Purdue was doing about stopping that. Yeah. And because they didn't recruit enough depth to where I felt like they were subbing guys in and out on the defensive line enough to where they were fresh enough to make plays in the fourth quarter. And to make those, you're like, okay. And I'll say that's another sort of deal with how does Purdue sort of lose these games late. And a lot of it is the defense is just gassed and not making plays, where you're like, okay, stop time. Here we go, baby. We're going to get, and it's just like, oh man, this team has had the ball for like 3/4 of the game, and especially in the second half, and it's like the defense is just dropping. So I think, like I said, when Hagen came in, things got better on the defensive line and recruiting, exponentially. And I think if he continues to recruit y'all the 4-star defensive line guys, and he also will rotate guys in and out a lot more, keeps guys fresh. Love Hagen at the defensive line. Can't say enough about him. English, the secondary was pretty good. Corey Trice got drafted. He's a big corner. Safeties were pretty good. Linebackers, pretty good heavy linebackers. That's like, I'm just to be straight up, the linebacker recruiting. Marcus Bailey was a holdover from the previous regime. He was really good. Other than in that, like where I was trying to write the linebacker preview for Purdue this year, I'm like, somebody's gonna play. we're gonna put some guys on the field. But that is if Louisville is going to make the next step in the ACC, and I guess that's kind of what I wanted to talk about to finish it up, and that's sort of outside of offense, defense, since I do sort of follow ACC football, which is like me and like 12 other people. That's the step Brohm's going to make. He's got to get that defense. He's got to figure out the running game. I think he will. I don't think that what he did at Western Kentucky is a fluke. And if he gets that offensive line right, I think that offense is going to be dynamic. Can he recruit the defense? And that's going to be the limiting factor for Louisville is can he and whoever the defensive coordinator would be, Mark Hagen Ron English, whoever is there, because he changed defensive coordinators frequently at Purdue. And if he can get that guy, you can find that guy that he's like, this is my dude. This is the guy I trust. He's going to come out and give me the players. That's the limiting factor at Louisville. And so it's really just a question of how many guys y'all can pull out of Miami.
So far, so good. I mean, it looks
they're
like
working on it.
With transfers has picked up. One of the things I admire about Jeff Brohm from a transfer standpoint was that he always got guys from different divisions. Louisville was notorious previously for the lower level FCS guys moving up, but Jeff Brohm recruits Power 5. We've seen that this year. And this team is, it's a really perfect storm for Jeff Brohm. There's a running game. There's an offensive line. There's a defense. There's an established culture of somewhat compared to what it was years ago. And it's the easiest schedule potentially in college football. There is really no excuse this year to not win at least 8 or 9 games. So with everything that we've heard over the course of these 2 episodes, it really is going to come down to a couple of things for Louisville, and defense will be a big part of that. So that's going to wrap us up here on From the Pink Seats podcast. Jacob Lane, Matt McGavick, Vince LeCoco, Drew, thank you so much for stopping in and giving us some insight into Purdue. This has been a great episode. Where can the fans find you? I know we've got a lot of really smart football fans who are interested not only in just Louisville, but across the college football landscape. So where can they find you on Twitter and where your work is at?
Man, I'm all over the place. I'm on Twitter. What is it? Legend of SM. At Legend of SM. Follow me at your peril, I guess. I'm on Hammer and Rails, SB Nation. I'm at Bring on the Cats if you're into Kansas State. I'm at Shaking the Southland if y'all want to talk about Clemson a little bit. Otherwise, if y'all want to bring me back for the Clemson Louisville preview, feel free.
Yeah, well, that will be hopefully ACC championship weekend.
There we go. 2 games. We can do it twice. We can run it twice if you really want to.
The fun part is there's no Clemson on the schedule this year, so we don't have to worry about that in nature like we do every single year. That's the best part about this year, Drew, is there's no Florida State and there's no Clemson. So you guys enjoy duking it out over there. We'll see you in Charlotte, and then we will reconvene here, and we can talk all about that. Drew, thank you so much, my friend.
Hey, man, tell you what. You give Jeff Brohm a healthy team, 1 game to win in Charlotte. That's not bad. That's not a bad deal. Like, I wouldn't bet against him. But I would, actually, I will if they're playing Clemson. But otherwise, go Cards, I guess. I hope it'll be Florida State.
We heard the go cards. We finished there. We'll finish right there.
Hey,
That's the end of the episode. Thank you so much, Drew. We'll talk to you soon.